I shot 2 professional football games this past week, both at night and both under floodlights, so I thought I'd share some of the settings I used and the challenges I faced. As I record this video in early October 2024, we have just started to head into autumn or fall here in the UK. I've done videos here on my channel before about shooting in low light, so I wanted to revisit the topic, but to do so, giving you some examples from the 2 games I literally just shot. I grabbed a little bit of video at the games to help show you the environment and the setting. So let's walk through now the settings I used, the conditions, what impact those conditions made, what worked and what didn't. Let's start then with experimenting with auto ISO. And we live in a world now where everything is digital. We all probably follow our favourite photographers or photographers whose work inspires us on social media. And I sometimes find myself not just inspired, but also a little bit envious of some photos. And the main thing that gets me is when shooting at night, their images are really, really clean. And this is probably because they're all top photographers and will be using the latest high-end mirrorless bodies. Despite having been doing pro football photography for more than a decade now, almost every game I shoot, I still find myself experimenting. For both games this past week, I did a brief stint with auto ISO. Now, in the back of the camera, the images largely look pretty good. However, when I put them on laptop, you begin to see a couple of issues. Firstly, the team I photographed primarily play in white kit or uniform, and so exposing for that means that the ISO is super high for a night game. And that's great because it lifts the entire image, but it was pretty much overexposing those white jerseys. Secondly, in lifting the ISO to those very high levels, what it was doing is introducing a ton of noise, or that grain that we're so used to seeing. Fine when you're viewing on maybe a phone or social media, but when these images are blown up for printing or to view on your laptop, I really can't stand it and how noisy they are. Therefore, as I nearly always do, I switch back into full manual mode, and I'll come back to that and the settings I used in just a moment. Something else to be aware of when you're shooting in any light really, but particularly artificial light and particularly in the evenings, depending on the level of the venue you're shooting at, and by that I mean the standard when it comes to floodlights etc. Light is often really uneven across the pitch or the playing area, and this is something I always have to keep in mind at this particular stadium where I shoot an awful lot. The corners of the pitch are really dark. The wings or the wide areas are also pretty dark when compared with the middle of the pitch. Additionally, the penalty area at one end of the pitch is significantly darker than the penalty area at the opposite end of the pitch. Again, you may not notice this with the naked eye, but when you're shooting sports, as I do, you certainly do notice these changes in light, and the settings you used will be impacted by this. So what about the settings that I used? Well, for the most part, I was always shooting with a 1/1000th shutter. I did briefly knock it up a little bit a couple of times, but never for very long. Aperture was set to 2.8. This is going to let as much light into the lens as possible, while also giving you that lovely shallow depth of field and subsequent bokeh. Therefore, the ISO was being set at around 4200 or 5000 for the majority of both games. When it was really heavily raining during one game, I did tone it down just a little bit because it kind of started to bring out too much of the rain. When added to the noise of the image as well, it was just a little bit distracting. So my first 2 proper night fixtures of the season are done, and as we lose that natural light before kickoff and go into full dark mode if you like, they were okay from a photography perspective, but I'll no doubt continue to experiment and beat myself up for things throughout the next few months of dark, dreary stadium shooting as we go through autumn and winter. If you want to see my full video on getting sharp images at night, please go check out the video link below, which is hopefully also on screen now. Please consider subscribing if you haven't done so, and I'll see you on the next video.